Welcome back, everyone. My peeves with games. Oh, there could be a lot of them, but I've tried to refine them into a very particular list for this video. Some of you may have already watched my pet peeves with JRPGs by FemTrooper. I tuned into that one last week. I enjoyed it, but there were only a couple of things there that I really agreed with. And I thought about this for a little bit because I'd actually been sitting on a few of these for well over a year, but I haven't really been able to muster a big enough list worthy of a presentation, worthy of a video like this. And then it dawned on me after watching her video, I didn't want to focus on just what my tastes were and what my preferences were in games, and when developers include things in games that I simply don't like. My peeves today, at least the bulk of what I'm going to focus on, and what I find makes this a little more of a unique video, are things that developers, maybe the writers, get wrong within the context of their own game worlds. So how's this one to kick things off? Strong characters getting nerfed when they join your party. And I bet as soon as I said that, something from an RPG or a JRPG popped in your head. For me, it's a character that should have some continuity between Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy IV The After Years. When she joins your party in the After Years, you would expect that she would be level 50 plus, really strong, full of all these great spells, and yet when you get to play her there, even though you know that she was much stronger in Final Fantasy IV, she's just relatively weak, and it makes no sense. There are a couple of games that do a better job of this sort of continuity. For example, Tears of the Kingdom. There's at least a really good explanation for why Link is not as powerful as he was at the end of Breath of the Wild. Metroid Dread, same thing. There's a great reason for why Samus is not as strong as she should have been at the ending of the last game that you played her in. The next one, level 1 as a starting level. I don't know why developers don't experiment with this more often. And we've seen in the earliest days, or some of the earliest days of JRPGs, with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green, that your starting Pokemon were level 5. And it made such great sense when later on, when eggs became a thing and hatching Pokemon became a thing, that they would hatch at level 1. There are no level 1 wild Pokemon. When you go into the wild, even in the earliest routes, Pokemon are at least level 2, which makes some sense. They've already grown up a little bit in the wild. They've presumably had some experience battling or fighting each other or whatever it is. So why is it, what did I write down here? In Xenoblade Chronicles, why does Rein start out at level 1 when he's already got this combat training? Same thing in Tales of Vesperia. Yuri, he doesn't have to start at level 1. It would make sense within the context of the game for him to be level 5, let's say. Next, overused enemy types. And this really has to do with the lack of creativity by the developers. Lightning Returns is the most egregious offender of this. I just felt like when I played the game, and I could be exaggerating here, I don't remember it perfectly, but that's because I didn't really like the game, you kept on running into the same enemy types as you progressed through the game. The only difference is they'd be recolored. There might be a couple different details on the monsters. They're kind of mechanical, so maybe it's like a different head or a different collar or shoulder piece, whatever. And of course, they'd be stronger. But what is that? And I was trying to think about it today before I recorded this. Did it make sense in that game world? No, it doesn't. I mean, maybe if you see the same enemy 1 or 2 times, right? So there's a basic form that you encounter in the early portions of the game, and then later on you see that there's an upgraded version, fine. But I swear, and I could be misremembering, but I don't think I am, you would see several of the enemies 3 times. Next, bosses becoming common enemies. Now, not everybody minds this. Sometimes people like seeing a boss character reappear later in the game, and it's not as a boss fight. It really is just like a common enemy placement. But some people still enjoy that because it shows that your character has developed from the beginning to the end of the game. It shows that you've gotten stronger, and now you can trounce an enemy that previously was a challenge for you, but now you just walk all over them. I get it. I understand why that might be appealing to you, but for me, again, it feels cheap. I always have this thought of bosses being a little more unique, and so I feel like when they just kind of reappear later in the game, whether they're recolored or not, it just kind of cheapens what that character is like, and it also makes me think that developers got a little lazy when implementing enemies in that particular area. Now, this happens in Dark Souls. I'm not going to be explicit with which enemies because I don't want to spoil anybody, I can see both sides of the argument. I can see mine, which is they shouldn't have done that, and I could see how other people would say, but it makes sense in this game. Other people have complained that this happens in beat 'em ups. I'm not a big beat 'em up fan, but if you want to mention any examples of beat 'em ups where you've seen this, and again, maybe for fear of spoilers, don't be explicit about which enemy that is, I'd like to read that in the comment section as well. Finally, the last example of my peeves that don't really make sense in the game world still has to do with bosses. Especially human bosses, or the same type of whatever your main character is. Bosses that have an extra digit of HP that you're allowed to have. So let me just explain this a little bit better. Final Fantasy VIII, all right? You can have up to 4 digits of HP, 9999, 9,999 health points. Why is it then that you could still fight human enemies and their HP can exceed 4 digits? They could have 10,000, 12,000 hit points. Why can't that happen for your character? Doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's very fair, and I don't think it's very smart. If you want to make the enemy human characters stronger for their boss fights, give them better abilities. Give them things that are within your grasp as well, but they just wield them much better than you do. So those were the main peeves that I wanted to present, and now I have a small list of gameplay peeves that, again, I didn't want to be too extensive because I could just go on forever about my nitpicks with gameplay. But these ones I thought were kind of funny, and these ones came to me most recently. So mundane exploration and walking. You know, a lot of games can be described as walking simulators. I'm not talking about those. I feel like from top to bottom, those ones are filled with a lot of poor gameplay decisions. These examples here, Thronebreaker, Dream Tactics, Gree, I feel like these ones are thinking they do a good job of presenting the game, thinking that the walking and exploration is fun for the player, but it's not executed properly. And in Thronebreaker, I'm probably going to warm up to it the more that I play. There are some things on the map that you get to collect, resources for your character, but it's just that the walking speed is too slow. And how do you know that this is a mistake on the part of the developers? Because there's an upgrade that you can purchase to increase your movement speed. Tell me, why would they add that if they didn't feel like the movement speed was already adequate for the player? Now, there are some examples of games that do what may seem like mundane walking or exploration quite well. And I'm going to go back to the Pokemon series. The reason why I feel like Pokemon is a more rewarding experience, well, is exactly that, because the rewards. Most areas have new Pokemon for you to find and capture. Most areas will have unique items, TMs, that are otherwise unobtainable unless you look around for them. I will admit, the experience can become a little tedious when you start to get to the water portions of some areas, when you get to Victory Road, and you've already seen all the Pokemon that Victory Road has to offer. At this point, you're starting to spam repels so you could get through this area uninterrupted. When you have to use an item like a repel to stop interacting with Pokemon battles, which are a main part of Pokemon games, because they're becoming so boring and so overdone, yeah, the game is starting to suffer at that point. My next gameplay peeve: unrealistic stealth mechanics. Now, this is one where you have to pick your battle. Do you want to make it a little bit more like Wind Waker, where you can walk around the barrel and as soon as you're seen without it, you're immediately whistled down and thrown back in jail? Or do you want to make it like Cyberpunk, where there's some leeway with being seen by an enemy? See, in Cyberpunk, you can stick to the shadows, you can stay behind buildings, and when a character catches a glimpse of you, they have a little meter over their head that starts to fill up. And if it fills up with you in vision of them, then you're found. You're discovered, they sound the alarm, everyone attacks you. But I feel like that leeway is so unrealistic. I mean, think about it. You're a guard, you're patrolling a building, and you think you see something. Okay, well, it disappears in a split second. But you keep on looking in that direction, and oh, there it is again. Well, there's somebody there, but I haven't seen them for 2 seconds, so I can't actually tell people that there's somebody there. Doesn't make sense from a realistic point of view, but if you imagine the game without that leeway, it becomes so punishing trying to have a stealth playthrough. There's another game I'm thinking of now where you have to suspend your disbelief, and that's Days Gone. You can hide in these shrubs in the tall grass, and the enemies apparently can't see you sticking out. That's fine. That's not the part that I'm thinking of as a peeve. But you have these little stones, an unlimited supply that you could throw wherever around the enemies, and they'll just constantly distract the enemies. Now again, put yourself in the shoes of that particular guard. And you just constantly keep on seeing these stones hitting the ground in front of you, and you're just going, oh, is there somebody there? Oh, is there somebody there? These are just examples where, again, for the gameplay, it's almost a necessity. Otherwise, the stealth sections wouldn't work, or they'd be brutally difficult. But when you're actually playing it and you're abusing these mechanics, you start to feel like maybe there's a problem in how this is designed. Next, pursuits where you are prevented from catching up to the target. So this just happened in Cyberpunk, and there were a couple of missions where you have to follow somebody, you're tailing them to get to a location. Look, my cars are really fast in this game. My driving is better than the NPCs at times. I'm catching up to the vehicles, and then what happens? It's like we have two magnets in our car that repel each other, and they suddenly shoot forward. It's like, really? You can't just let me catch them, and maybe the mission has a unique ending because I caught up to them? No, instead it's about getting to the destination with that character that you're chasing, and so it doesn't matter how you're driving, as long as you don't fall too far behind, you're both going to end up there, you're not going to catch their vehicle. Don't really like that, but whatever. And finally, the floor is yours. If you want to focus on more things when it comes to gameplay that you don't like, please go nuts and list them. Again, it wasn't meant to be the point of this video. I didn't want to focus on gameplay nitpicks, but if you want to talk about floaty jumps in platformers, or we're just talking about cars, rubber banding in racing games and how much that annoys you, I'm sure there's going to be tons of other people who agree with you, so throw that in the comments and we'll see how many people like the comment. It's going to be interesting to gauge. Maybe it's something else that's not necessarily about the gameplay, but it still affects your immersion or your experience. Maybe you just hate so many UIs that are in the games. Maybe you don't like when UIs are kind of sterile, which is the problem with a lot of modern games, and you want things to have a grittier or more appropriate look for the game. I actually have one more peeve that's more about people who talk about games than it is about the games themselves, and it has to do with what is an RPG, or more specifically, what qualifies as a JRPG. And having played these games now, I don't see them as RPG experiences, and they are the early Fire Emblem games, haven't played the recent ones like Three Houses, and Secret of Mana. How is Secret of Mana a JRPG? You have your set characters. Sure, you have your choice of using whichever weapons you want, and those weapons level up with you as you play the game, but I feel like RPGs need a little more customization. One of the things that's truly indicative of an RPG experience to me is character creation. Secret of Mana has none of that. You are playing as the set characters. Now, yes, you can rename them, and I suppose for some people that's enough of an immersion. That's enough of the role-playing experience, but I personally don't feel it. Secret of Mana to me is an action game first and foremost. The Fire Emblem games are turn-based strategy, or not turn-based, tactical strategy games first and foremost. I don't get the role-playing experience from those, but that's just a small gripe. It's not something that really has to be figured out. And especially as modern games in particular, and indie games, they start to blend and fuse so many genres together. You have action games with RPG mechanics. You have RPGs with crafting mechanics. Everybody's borrowing from the other genres and mixing and matching them. So really all I try to do is point out the primary genre, the primary gameplay experience, and who cares about all the other bells and whistles that are thrown in afterwards. Anyways, not worth arguing about. That's just how I'm wrapping up this list. Thank you everybody for watching. Once again, please, when it comes to listing your peeves, I don't mind whether you're talking about your preferences and your tastes. I just wanted to focus on something a little bit different for this video. Hope you enjoyed watching, and I'm looking forward to reading what everybody has to contribute. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Go Leafs go.